My name's Bill Cole, and I'm 78 years old. I've been married 60 years, and let's see, I live about 3/4 mile where I was born, and where I live now, my great-grandfather homesteaded that place. And then when the railroad come through, they give the right-of-way for the railroad to come through their property. And but anyway, at one time, my great-grandpa owned Nestor Park Road and all Baker Prairie. I don't know where he owned it or where he just farmed it, but he had something to do with it. And let's see, I started to work for Lone Oak Dairy when I was 16, and then I made $20 a week, and I got off every other Sunday. And then I worked through my senior year there at the Lone Oak Dairy, and I worked at a boarding, delivered milk, and then I went to school. I had one subject need to graduate, and that was English, and then I went home. And then, well, before I started working for the Lone Oak Dairy, I worked at Sutton's for a little while, Sutton's Handle Factory. Well, it wasn't a handle factory then. They had their sawmill here, and they had their handle factory over at Lurton. And me and another guy kind of done maintenance on, we cleaned up, and I kept the killer going, stuff like that. And I worked there. I didn't work there too long when I went to work for the dairy. Then I worked there till I got married. Worked there a few years after I got married, and I was making $30 a week when I got married, and he gave me a $2.50 raise, so I was making $32 a week, $32.50 a week, and we got by on that. And then we had a boy and a girl, and they both graduated from high school here, and we've got 5 grandkids and 7 great-grandkids, and we've got a grandkid that lives at Springdale, and he works at the university, and his wife teaches at the university. And then we've got a son that's a doctor. He lives at Fort Smith, and then we've got a daughter that lives in North Carolina. Her and her family, they all live over there, and she teaches school over at Asheville, North Carolina. And I went to school at Ridgeway through the 9th grade, and then they transferred us to Harrison. And we were kind of outcast down at Harrison. They didn't have much to do with us because they didn't know what to do with the country kids, I guess. And we never did get to participate in anything, but I made it through high school. I had 2 teachers, I guess, that if I hadn't had them, well, I wouldn't have got through school. I had Jim Nicholson, he was a teacher, and then Gerald Moore, he taught math. And but some of the other teachers, I never did like English, and I just didn't care for that stuff. But anyway, I got through high school. Now, that's right after I got through high school, I went to work for the dairy, like I said. And I was in the National Guard for 30 years, and then I worked for the phone company for 35 years. And when I started working for the phone company, it was Boone County. Then Alltel or Allied bought Boone County out, and then they merged with a company up in the east, and they called it Alltel. And then soon after I retired, they sold their cellular part and the landlines, and they named the company Windstream. And there's been a lot of in the last 50 years, there's been a lot of changes in communications, especially telephones and computers. Back when I started, we didn't have anything like that. And back when I started working, we had 8-party lines. They didn't want to. Some people in town had private lines and 2-party lines, but nobody knew what a private line was out in the country. You had 8 people on there, and lots of times you couldn't get the phone. And let's see, what else did I do? That's about, I'm thinking.
That's all right. Tell me about something unique growing up in your family. How many kids there were, and some things that happened to you growing up as a child.
Well, we were kind of poor, of course, like everybody else was, And my dad, he was a carpenter, and my mother, she cleaned houses in Harrison, and we got by like that. And we never did have much, but we always had plenty to eat. We never did go without a meal. And we didn't get electricity till 1946. And that winter, we got electricity in the summer, and that winter we had a big ice storm. We had to do without electricity. Of course, we wasn't used to electricity anyway. And and we had to carry our water, and that was my job, to carry water. And when I was growing up, we had an old cow and pigs, and my dad raised broilers. And when he got them up, we'd kill a bunch of them, and then he'd sell the rest of them. And then my mother always had chickens and stuff like that. And I've been working ever since I've been big enough to know how to work, I guess. I just can't stand a lazy person. And when I got old, maybe 10 or 11 years old, I'd go down, and my uncle worked at the post office, and I'd go down and work for him. He went to work at 10 o'clock, and I'd go down and work for him, do little things around. He'd give me a quarter, and I'd ride to town with him, and I got a hamburger for a dime, and a bottle of pop for a nickel, and went to the movie for a dime, and that was my quarter. And I think he got off around 6 o'clock or something like that, and then I'd ride back home with him. Sometimes I'd stay for the second show, but most of the time I just run around town there. And I remember going over to the post office. He'd let me stamp them letters, but you couldn't get in there now. They wouldn't even let you in there. But anyway, I had a pretty good time, and it was pretty hard on us growing up. I had a sister, and I had 4 half brothers, and so we made it. And I remember when I was a kid, 2 of my half brothers had a sawmill, and I'd go down and shovel sawdust down under the saw all morning, and they'd give me 50 cents. Well, I was going to save all them 50 cents is to buy me a bicycle. Back then you'd get a bicycle for $25, $30, but I'd always spend my 50 cents before I got enough to buy me a bicycle. And anyway, but let's see.
Give me something, a significant person in your life, somebody who meant a lot to you, who taught you a lot, or had a big impact upon your life.
Well, I guess my uncle, Charlie Hunt, had a pretty big impact on it. He always tried to steer me right. He always said if you need to borrow something, you didn't need it. And also my half brother Charles, he was pretty. I was pretty close to him, but I was close to all my half brothers. But anyway, I guess Charles, I was more close to him than anybody. And I remember one time during the war, he went out. He stayed on a farm out here north of town. Went out to work at the farm, raised crops, and he raised beans. And I went out there and stayed a week and helped him pick beans, and he gave me $1 for all that week. And then we took them down to the canning factory. They had tomatoes and beans. Well, they had beans first and then tomatoes, but they was canning them for the war, and that's where the war was going on. And anyway, but that's about all that I can tell you, I guess.
Okay. Well, you were here during the flood, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, tell me something about the flood, and start in like you're just telling me for the first time. Tell me something about the flood. How it happened, how it impacted you, where you were. Just start and tell about the flood.
Well, when the flood came, we were up at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Her brother was stationed up there, and we heard over the radio that they had some flood, but they didn't say how bad it was. Well, they had called the National Guard out to patrol the streets and everything. As soon as I got back, I went patrolling the streets, and I did my part of the night because I had to work during the day. And then there was, I believe, Foremost or Highland or somebody brought some truckloads of water in, and I helped distribute the water. And then I knew a man that there was 4 people that I believe died in that flood, and they had the people out. They had the National Guard out looking for them people, and one of the boys found a mannequin and scared him to death. He thought that was a man. But anyway, that was about the flood, and it did do a lot of damage and everything. And I think it destroyed all the grocery stores except one, and I think that was maybe Piggly Wiggly's or Carby's out here in Northvale Shopping Center. And it took a long time. The town has changed a lot since that happened. But one reason it flooded so much, they had an old bridge there, and it washed trees and buses and stuff down to the that old bridge, and it stopped it up, and that's kind of dammed it up, and that's what made the water go over get into town.
Don't you think that could happen again like that?
I don't think it would now, the way they got the levee built.
I interviewed one man, and he said it could happen again.
Well,
Holt, Mr. Holt.
Jack Buddy, yeah, his farm, part of his farm was all underwater out there, but he kind of lived up on a hill, so.
Well, give me a humorous story, something that happened. You were giving me some, but give me a humorous story. Like Ms. Sharp said, you need to give me a humorous story that happened to you either as an adult or coming up as a child.
Well, I don't know. I can't think of one right now.
Okay.
But all the time I was in the National Guard, the closest we come to going anywhere was the Cuban crisis. And now, well, wait a minute. Now, 1956, a bunch of us, well, I didn't have to go, but there's a bunch of our unit went to Little Rock for that school segregation. One day, the officers was keeping them out, and the next day Eisenhower was letting them in, so that was quite a deal there. And then we got called out several times to look for people and stuff like that. And then when they brought the Cubans over to Fort Chaffee, we kind of had to take care of them over there. They was pretty mean. And then when Bush, the old man Bush, was vice president, I was one of the color guards out to college. I was lucky to be one of the color guards. And we were over Fort Smith, or Fort Chaffee, when that happened. And they flew us back in a helicopter they took our unit, some of our people out of our unit, they flew us back in a helicopter, and we was color guards there. But they had a lot of security, I know that. And we had, I worked for the phone company then, we had to provide a lot of phones for them people. But now they got cell phones, they don't worry about that, but we had to put a lot of phones up there in the old Holiday Inn, and
what was this for, Bill?
And when they dedicated that fountain out there to the college for John Paul Hammersmith.
Who came that was so important?
Vice President Bush, the old man Bush.
Okay. Give me, what would you say if you could, now, you and I'll be dead and gone when we're going to watch some of this. So what would you say to this generation that we're in right now? What advice or exhortation would you give the generation now? Because we've seen things they've never seen. So what would you say to them? Exhort them. What would you say to them?
Well, I think the government is
Let's back up. And I want you to say it so I'm not in it, okay? Why don't you say something? To start off, Bill would say, the young people today, I would say this.
The young people today, they don't do much work. I mean, they don't have anything to do. And that's the reason probably have so much crime. They get out, they don't have nothing to do, and they get bored, and they get out and do things. And back when I was a kid, we had to do things. But they're raising a lazy generation now because I think they just sit and watch television and play on the computer, and that's about it. And that's not going to get it later on. I don't believe. But they need to change some way. I don't know. My biggest complaint is people that gets them food stamp cards, and they're just lazy, don't want to work. I know people that's able to work, and They just don't want to because they get food stamps. And I'll guarantee you, if I need a job, I could have me a job before the day's over with, someplace here in town, but it might not be what I wanted because it'd be a paying job. And I also helped my nephew. My half brother was a contractor, and then his son took over, and I helped my nephew after I retired. And we built several houses, done a lot of remodeling, but he just said he's getting old enough, he just quit. We haven't done any more. But he's built a lot of houses here in town. His dad did. And I guess his dad probably learned from my dad because my dad was a good carpenter. He was particular. And my nephew was too, because if it wasn't square and level, it wasn't right. And we had to, if I done something he didn't like, he'd make me tear it out and start over. And so anyway, I stay busy. My son tells me, he's a doctor, and he tells me if I stay busy, you'll live longer. And so I guess a lot of people don't believe I'm 78 years old, but they say I look awful young to be 78, but my wife, she's 3 years younger than I am, so you can figure out. And something else, we got married when she was 15 and I was 18. And we got married in June. She'd been 15. No, we got married when she was 14. I'll back up. Did I say that? Anyway, and then she'd been 15 in August, but it took us 2 years to have our first kid. So we kind of grew up with her kids, and we got them all through, and they're all good. All my grandkids got good jobs. And one of my granddaughter's husband, they live in Fort Worth. He's a pathologist at one of the big hospitals down in Fort Worth, and they doing good. Anyway, that's about all I got to say.